Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel Quantum Leap podcast with Sam and Dennis. I'm Sam. This is new for us. We've never done this before. Generally, we record, a couple of days before, but access to the screener did not come as it normally does due to a number of things. But we got it earlier this afternoon. I was able to watch it. Dennis was not, so he came in completely cold to the episode. And it's interesting because one thing that happened for both of us, it seems, is that we stopped taking notes early on in the episode, and then as the episode went on, it was just kind of hard to kind of keep up in some ways. Having the benefit of having seen it twice now, I was able to do the live tweeting, and I'm sure I'm going to have to watch it again because I'm sure I missed out on a couple of things, just by virtue of it being, as tense as it is. That said, we've got a room here of folks that have watched the episode for the watch along, and we're also joined by Dean Georgaris from the show, the executive producer, showrunner, which we're thrilled to have him back here for a moment. So let's just kick things off real simple. Dennis, what did you think?
So I wanted to say this to Dean. So I didn't get to watch the screener in advance. So when you posted the poll at the beginning of the episode, like who's the poll or like who's the mole, I guessed it was Iggy. I didn't know, but I guessed based on something you said in our interview a couple of weeks ago. And I almost did that as a write-in. But then I was afraid if I was right, then I was the jerk with the screener who was throwing spoilers out. And I didn't want to look that way. That being said, man, what an episode to not have gotten the screener in advance for.
That was just, by the way, it was just a technical thing. The special effects, some of the special effects were done really, really late. And when they sent the screener, as Sam saw, originally sent the file out, there were problems. The file was corrupt, so they didn't post it. They ended up posting the sort of corrupt file today, I think, just because they wanted people to have something to watch. But I was happy to see that it was not corrupt on NBC.
Yeah, just for the full context, what the screener ended up being, the aspect ratio was off, so kind of the sides of the episode were cut off, and it's strange because it was still technically in widescreen, so it was almost as like the image had been blown up, and we lost a little bit on the sides, and then a couple of like the special effects shots were a little pixelated or whatever. It certainly didn't detract. I was able to to follow along just fine, but it was definitely a different experience. The episode overall, I think, is certainly one of the most tense of the season, and as a couple of people have commented, probably one of the most tense of Quantum Leap. And a lot of that certainly I think is linked to the atmosphere of being in the asylum. Dean, can you talk a little bit about breaking the story on this one and what that process was like?
Yeah, this is actually the only episode of the year that we threw out an episode. We had started to break a completely different story, different tone, different energy. It was like a spy thriller-y type thing. And we got pretty far into it, but just didn't feel like it. I was like, this isn't Quantum Leap. This doesn't feel like Quantum Leap. So we threw it out fairly late in the process. And we had, this one was in the back of our mind of like, we had a list of cool settings or great original episodes or combinations. And we switched it to this, and it just so happened that there was a really great, like sort of almost everything you saw of the asylum is an existing set, not too far from where we shoot. So it was, and we were late enough in the run where those kinds of things are considerations, like we don't have an unlimited budget, we don't have unlimited time, like, so it came together really well. That episode was shot in 7 days, not 8.
Wow.
So I remember Caitlin telling me how exhausted everybody was after those 7 days, just because, I mean, she covers a lot of emotional territory. And the original cut of the episode came in 52 minutes long, so 10 minutes longer than what you saw. So one of the reasons I think it probably feels so tight and edgy and edge of your seat is, we were able to pare it down to really, when you can really tighten an episode like that, really squeeze it, I think it helps. Like the other episode that came in at 52 minutes and we cut 10 minutes out of, I'll let Dennis guess what episode that was, because it was his favorite.
I don't know how often my favorite one switches from week to week.
Okay, well, it was
my
Little Faith.
Okay, all right.
Was also a 52.
I remember you told us that, yeah.
That we cut down to 42.
Do you think that this episode, not necessarily You Little Faith, but that this episode kind of proves as an example that, when you cut that stuff, you get a stronger episode out of it? Because I know in this day and age, I mean, not necessarily in this day and age, but for the past like 20 years with access to DVDs and Blu-rays and everything, there's this kind of hunger, I think, sometimes for deleted scenes and director's cuts and extended editions. But would you use this as an example of saying, hey, sometimes less is more?
Yeah, I think both, in both cases, you have Little Faith in this. The 42-minute, 25-second cut is a better episode. Like, it's just objectively better, I think. Like, there's just the pacing, there are no lulls, like certain pieces of story or information are taken out that were nice. For example, we probably lost almost 2 minutes of story just in the walk and talk where Walter, which was the name of the orderly, is pushing Ben down that corridor. There was a ton of dialogue there. Walter was telling you about Dr. Mueller, how they served together in the war. Ben passed a room where radio was playing and Brown versus Board of Education was being announced. So it was a lot of atmosphere, but it was just, when you take it out, it was infinitely more creepy. And
right.
And it was moving faster.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that absolutely shows. It's funny you mentioned that, because now I can recall at one point having seen that dialogue about them being in the war together and not missing it. That it doesn't necessarily feel like, while that's cool information, perhaps it's not necessary to the story that's being told. You mentioned Brown versus the Board of Education. We get some other really great context clues about when we are right off the bat, with Ben mentioning JFK and the reaction that Dr. Mueller has, the music, of course. A question that we do get asked frequently is that we don't get the date stamped on our screens, right? Or like, that's not what this show does. That was something obviously the classic series did. Can you talk about the decision to not do that and instead using kind of these context clues to just, I think, for me personally, engage the viewer a little bit more than just saying this is when we are?
Yeah, I think we've done the stamp twice, or I think we did it in episode 2 and episode 8. And we've talked about toying around with, depending on the style and the time of the episode, maybe we would put the timestamp on. But I think as the season's gone on, it just feels more interesting to us to make it, something you figure out. I mean, whenever you put a timestamp on something, you're kind of announcing to the audience, you're watching a TV show. And I think especially in these later episodes, you sort of want to pull them in experientially, like from the beginning.
For sure.
So I don't think you'll see any more timestamps, period. I don't think we're doing it in season 2.
Is it just coincidence that the 2 episodes that did use them both took place in the 90s?
It is. I would love to say that was planned. Like, we've planned, or I should say, planned is a strong word. But so, like, for example, Ziggy is the mole, I think, was figured out when we were writing episode 8. So it's not like that wasn't planned.
Sure.
But the date is one of the few things that, like, honestly was a little loosey-goosey between us. We kind of were like, we couldn't figure out which one we liked more.
Sure.
So.
Well, I was also curious too, just to stay on the dates for just 1 second, is it occurred to me if you were doing that, so you have less people like nitpicking, like, oh, well, this didn't happen on this date, because like people were doing that with Atlantis. Like, oh, like 1998, the Atlantis didn't actually go on a thing. It's like, oh God. And so I realized like, it just gets pedantic after a while. Like if you put a hard date on it, then people have more opportunity to pick those things apart.
That's true.
So I will say I have been on team put the damn date on the screen, but I'm also coming around to reasons as to why not.
No, I mean, look, I'm interested. I was trying to watch a little bit on Twitter because I like to watch the East Coast feed and see what people react to. And you know, this episode in particular, and the last episode, 18, I mean, the final episode, are pretty mythology heavy. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, but let's just call it the mythology for season one, you know, like why did Ben leap and what's going on? And so whenever episodes are mythology heavy, I'm always interested to see, because I think, you know, our audience is a little bifurcated. You know, there are people who wish we could basically be devoted to the leap. I would say not all the time, but more often. You know, like let's say out of 42 minutes, maybe be on the leap 35 minutes and with 7 minutes of assist. And then there are people who really like the fact that we have a sort of present day serialized mystery. So it's always interesting to me to see how people react. And I'm fascinated by watching people who are like, Ziggy, that doesn't make any sense. And, you know, like, I think it doesn't take a lot of thinking to figure out like why Ziggy would make a lot of sense as a source of information to someone who's time traveling using the same equipment, but in the future. Like, it's not like that huge a stretch, which is why we liked it. It was just sitting there right in front of us.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. The decision to, you know, I think that a lot of sort of the guesswork that people had done beforehand, which is always a lot of fun, the speculation that takes place, especially when you do kind of get into that mythology, involved the idea of there being a different project, you know, perhaps even a project that was at the old location in New Mexico or something like that. The idea here is, of course, that that's not the case, that this is just a future version of this project. Is that, I mean, that seems to be what we're going for. If that's not something you can answer, I completely understand. But I'm curious about the, you know, the ideas behind that. And of course, it sets Ziggy up perfectly as being the mole as well. So I'm curious as to how that came to be.
Well, you know, I mean, Martin likes to say all the time that basically we're the past. He's like, we're the past. We're not the present, we're the past. We're the past to the future. And so I think Ian says in this episode, rightfully deducing, if Martinez leaps the same way Ben leaps, then it would mean that Martinez is not technically an evil leaper. And if Martinez can see Addison, these are all clues that Martinez is certainly using, if not the same equipment, similar equipment, derivative equipment, probably more derivative in terms of design than, say, the quantum accelerator that's Ben using compared to Sam. Like, we don't really ever talk about how much has the quantum accelerator evolved. And
Right.
Might that be a reason why in Sam leaps there's a waiting room and in our leaps there's not a waiting room? You know, like there's sort of the whole discussion of the accelerator and how it changes over time, or what it's changed over time, is something we talk a lot about as a room. And yeah, like I said, I'm just the past. Like future me knows how many seasons of Quantum Leap there are.
Is that the type of stuff that, you know, it's so difficult because obviously there are people that ask questions and want to see on screen like definitive answers to some of that, like what is the technology and why is it different? However, again, there's 42 minutes. So do you think that that's something that the show, not you specifically, that the show will indeed address on screen? Or do you think that that might be too much of a sacrifice because there are only 42 minutes and you are trying to balance these stories and you are trying to have those engagements and connections with the leaps and the guest stars, as well as, of course, with headquarters and stuff. So it can be obviously a delicate balance already. And now we're talking about adding other stuff in that is mostly just exposition.
Well, I think what's great about the original show is that if you are really careful, you can end up drawing a lot of seemingly complicated threads and pulling them together one by one, right? So for example, like Martinez in this season, right? Like a seemingly evil leaper. Now, then that information is sort of discredited in 14 when they both coordinate leaps. Ben's not aware of it, but
Right.
Martinez is certainly aware of it. And then in 16, they work together until it's, until the leap is successfully secured. And then Martinez does everything in his power to make sure Ben does not survive to follow him. So I guess my point is, like, all of that stuff, I think I remember along the way during the year, I would read complaints about things that didn't make sense or didn't add up. And what I find is I'm sure there will be things that we ultimately can't explain or can't connect or can't evolve, but you would be surprised how much we can. And one thing I say to everybody is, anytime there's disagreement or discord, that's actually opportunity for writing to happen. You know what I mean? So for example, and I'm in no way saying there is, the waiting room is a piece of the first quantum leap. But the fact that it's a piece of the first quantum leap and you haven't seen it on the second quantum leap, when people talk about that, where my brain goes as a writer, my brain goes immediately to, one day there's going to be an episode opportunity there. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think what we are really conscious of is in the current show is that we are, like if there's NCIS and there's NCIS Los Angeles, like we think of ourselves, Quantum Leap is a time show. This just happens to be Quantum Leap, the version that started fairly recently. Like, we're an offshoot, we're a cousin, we're a sister. We're not actually, like, the notion of a continuation in a time show is even interesting, right? Because like at a certain point. So I think when you think of like, how are we different? How are we similar? The goal is to surprise you as we slowly pull those threads closer and closer together.
Nice. I think that's a great answer, honestly, and I'm certainly looking forward to the finale, because I think that there's, as you mentioned earlier, it being kind of a mythology episode, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of, information that we are given and an explanation similar to what we got in this episode. The decision
here's what I'll say about the finale. I thought about organizing a contest to see how many callbacks to this season or to the original episode there are in the finale, and like the person who comes the closest would like win something. Like I'd fly them to Universal or something, because it's Margarita Matthews who wrote Ye of Little Faith and wrote Leap Die Repeat, wrote the finale for us and did a really incredible job. And it is one of those episodes that if you like callbacks and if you like, but this means that, and I can't, like, it's a very well-crafted puzzle.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to it. In an odd way, it's bittersweet. I don't want the season to end, but I also am very excited about it because, Margarita's work has been fantastic thus far. And I just think that there's been so much laid out for us in so many interesting ways. You mentioned Ziggy being the mole as that being kind of a decision that was made around episode 8. When we had Shakina on the show, she had mentioned that the decision that Ian was the one that, that informed Ben, that decision was something that had been kind of there pretty much from the beginning. Is that the case with that choice to have Ian be the one that prompted Ben to leap?
When Martin and I took over, and I should say when I joined Martin, because Martin had been on as an executive, sort of distant overseeing producer, like letting Stephen and Brian handle the day-to-day. But when I came in and Martin came in, and it does all become a blur after a while. We had some basic tent poles that we knew we wanted to hit, working backwards from from, we took what they gave us for a start. We imagined a finish. One day when the series is over, if we don't use this thing, I will tell you what our original alternate finish for season 1 was, because it was really clever and we aren't using it, which is, I'm glad we're not. I like what we're doing for season 2 even more, but it was kind of clever. So we did lay out that we were going to find out. Well, we had basic things, right? Like why doesn't the team know everything? Well, if the team doesn't know everything, and if Ben didn't tell anyone, there's really only one explanation that holds any kind of water, which is that Ben knows that Ben can't trust everyone, and Ben doesn't know who they can't trust. And then as we got into it, it's like, well, that makes sense, because if I tell anyone a secret, this is, the future has this Zoom as an access point. Someone a year from now could watch this and be like, look, Dean said this, but this didn't happen. Dean's an asshole. Pardon my language. So
have you listened to our show?
In a world with a quantum accelerator, we're all being recorded all the time, kind of like we are now. So we knew someone needed to be a mole or traitor, and we knew someone needed to be a guide or helper, or hopefully benevolent force. We needed sort of both, right? Because someone had to show up and say to Ben, you need to leap. We needed to explain what happened that night.
Right.
And we all love Ian, we all love Mason, and it also just made sense that given Ian's relationship with Ziggy, given Ian's understanding of the quantum accelerator, given Ian's friendship with Ben, it made sense to all of us that Ian would be the person to do this. And it also made sense that Ian would be a really interesting character to see wrestle with that. I can't believe I'm going to do this in 40 years.
Right. Yeah. In 40 years.
Or whatever it is. I'm just made that.
No,
I'm
just kidding.
Don't quote me.
So, speaking of, one of the aspects of the show, and one of our listeners, and also himself has a podcast about the show, Damon Sugamelli, who's on right now. We've talked a lot about the pattern to the leaps, and that if you look at the first run of episodes, there was this pattern of sort of Ben would go back, then forward, then back, then forward, then back, then forward. And now, recently it's been on this string of back, almost like somebody pulling a slingshot back and then letting it go. And how intentional is that to kind of be if you can even talk about this, the function that gets Ben to the future, to that point in time, in order to stop Martinez from killing Addison, which that was a big piece of information. It felt like it almost got dropped in almost casually. It was just sort of Janice is spitting out everything that's going to happen, and it's whoa, she just told us that Martinez kills Addison.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing, because it's a confirmation of a suspicion, right? We've all sort of suspected that's at least part of it. Hold on, I'm trying to convince Caitlin to jump on. It's me and Sam and how many of us?
That's a good question. Let's see.
Fans.
13. See, luckily we have people here that are willing to do the work.
If you all want to know what we're like, this is what we're like. We actually get along really well. I can tell you that we work very, very hard on this show. And it's, and because we all get along. And I'm incredibly anxious in a positive way to get to do season 2. I'm so glad that we're going to get to do it, because I just think, like I said, the quantum universe we can do so much.
Yeah,
but I don't know if I answered your question.
That's okay. Yeah, just about that sort of that slingshot theory. If you could talk about that at all. I don't, obviously I don't know if that wades into spoiler territory, but it does seem like there's a pattern to the leaps, and so I was just curious as to how intentional
early on,
that was.
I can't remember if it was Martin or I who early on just sort of liked this notion of gravitational navigation and time assisted. And then, yeah, and we even had a discussion for a while of, do we want it to be, I so want to answer some of these questions in the chat, but then I'm like, we're having some really interesting discussions about like, you know, because we're filming season 2 now, so it gives us a lot of interesting opportunities for 18. We talked about, do we want there to be a sort of cumulative butterfly effect to the leaps? But that just, it got a little too precious for us. Do you know what I mean? In other words, like, if Ben didn't do these exact 18 leaps, then these 18 changes wouldn't have happened, which is like, and I just like, I'm someone who's, I'm really emotionally driven. I'm kind of one of the people who's like responsible for like, how does it feel? How does it make you feel? What's the real version? Like too much mythology. It's not that I tune out. I really like it, but like, I'm more emotionally driven. So we decided just gravitational navigation through time in terms of being able to slingshot to a goal, whether that goal be the future or not, whether that goal just be a very specific, like you've got, you know, if time is moving, let's say time is orbiting in front of you in a 3-dimensional sphere, like if you want to hit a year, like, okay, you have to be pretty precise. If you want to hit a day, you have to be extremely precise. Like if you want to hit an hour on that day, you'd have to be even more precise, right? Like you have no wiggle room. So all of that builds up to what happens in 18. I will say that.
Nice. Going back to this episode specifically and been interrupted, the atmosphere of the episode, I think, just pays off in dividends, because immediately it's unsettling. What? She's here?
Caitlin B.
How about that? We'll let her get settled, and then she can bring herself on in here.
Do you want me to pop on?
Yes, please.
I was just watching. Hi, everybody. Hey,
Caitlin.
Sam.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Fantastic.
I actually just started watching, so I'm not going to be incredibly helpful, but I'm pumped.
I was telling them how easy this episode
be.
was to film, Caitlin, how you told me this one was a breeze. Just like,
this was easy. I took a nap the whole time. This was so hard. This was the hardest episode to film. Hi, Lexi. Yeah, it was rough. It was just like, I mean, you guys saw it. It was heavy and scary and gross, just in the sense of like, you know, it's like not pretty. And then, you know, it's terrifying. And, you know, Ray and I are going through our things, and it was a heavy one. And also, hi, Damon. Also, I think, and Dean can confirm this, I feel like the original cut came in like 10 minutes over time.
I told him.
Yeah. So we filmed a movie. Like, there should be a director's cut of this. Like,
well, you know, you mentioned how heavy it is and how dirty it is, and there is this visceral quality to the episode, and in particular those last few minutes, you know, with you and Raymond are, I mean, there's blood, he's putting the lighter to his neck, he's, you know, there's all of this, you know, this gruesome stuff, not to mention, of course, the attempted lobotomy that happens earlier. But when you're in that moment, right, and Ben's laying there bleeding out, and you know, you've got, you know, magic talking into your ear and everything, can you walk us just a little bit through that process? Because that's the type of stuff, I think, as an actor, that it's hard to just get up and be like, okay, I'm done now, you know, and go on to the next thing. So what's that like for you?
Yeah, well, it feels like your best friend is dying. Or you're, you know what I mean? It might not feel the full force of it, because, you know, obviously plenty of you knows it's not real. But I will say, and I'm not sure if Dean knows this, we did every single piece of coverage of that scene in one take.
Wow.
Yep. Ray and I both did everything we did in one take. Cause it was just like, you know, he's dying. I'm watching my friend Ray and Addison's Ben bleeding out. And
Yeah.
as long as you can accept that as true, the rest of it kind of takes care of itself.
Absolutely. One of the things that comes through in this episode too is the love story. There are so many really wonderful moments that are heartbreaking, because here you guys are so incredibly close and yet separated by decades, which I really love. Can you talk a little bit just about when you got the script, when you saw kind of how much of that was in there, while also knowing how harrowing things were going to get, what were your initial reactions to that?
Well, I was excited, because we've been waiting for all of these plot lines to come up, you know what I mean? And they finally revealed the Ziggy thing. And I knew that was going to be a big scene. I don't know if I really had a concept of how massive all of it in, total would be. But I mean, yeah, when I first read it, I was like, wow, this is a phenomenal episode. I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited for people to see it, because we're really launching till the end of the season now. Like all the things are really starting to clear up. So yeah, I mean, excitement, and then the healthy dose of terror of like, wow, I hope I do a good job. Just that part.
Yeah, well, you did.
Yeah.
You did a great job. I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, because we got the screener earlier today, which is obviously a little late for us, which is why we're getting to do this. So it's awesome that happened in a way. But when watching that, like, it really took me back to some of the stuff from SOS, because there was like, I think just the emotional content and the quality of kind of like your, the relationship with Ben, and after what you've gone through in SOS, and it's funny because I know that when you were on the show last, we talked a little bit about like how might some of this carry through, and I felt like as I was watching, it did. Did you feel that as you were, as you guys were filming? Was that something that was kind of like there for you, even if it was kind of unconscious?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, everything about her journey and more importantly, their
Say hi to
journey
Annelise,
together.
everyone who wrote the episode. She just
Annelise!
I'm good at wrangling
Oh,
people,
hello.
as Sam and Dennis know.
Hello,
Hi.
Annelise.
welcome.
Hello.
Hi,
I'm a
nice to
producer.
meet you
That's what
guys.
if you want to know what a producer does, this is what a producer does.
Yeah.
Brings everybody together.
Yes, well, didn't Caitlin do an amazing job acting this, guys?
No,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah.
It was
In fact, it's funny.
phenomenal script. I mean,
Thanks.
I completely agree. And that's one of the things that we were just talking about right before you hopped on, Annelise, was the idea that that there was, it felt like emotionally anyways, that there was certainly some carryover, from SOS and just in general with the arc that some of these characters have been on all season long anyway, and how intentional some of, how intentional some of that was. Because again, I feel like that this episode paid off a lot of things, not just kind of in the myth, arc kind of area, but also with some of the character development, and certainly with the romantic aspects between Ben and Addison.
Yes, that was my personal goal. I've just been the assistant this season, so I've had a privilege of mostly taking a back seat watching the writers do their amazing work. But as a fan just of the show, as a viewer, I really wanted to invest in Ben and Addison in their romance since we started the season at their engagement party. So I was really most excited about that in this episode. I thought this was a big Addison episode just because we got to see her be a little active in the Leafs. All the writers, we love Caitlin and how great she is at performing and just the character in general. So we were excited, especially Drew Lindo was super excited about the opportunity to have Addison and Martinez have like a conversation and have her actually be able to talk to someone in the Leafs.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because first of all, I thought that was wonderful, and I completely agree. The opportunity to see Addison as active as she was, and to see like even the moment at the end as well, with her kind of willing Ben to climb up that ladder, get in that car, keeping him awake. Like there was definitely a lot of agency on her part that went far beyond just, I'm here for emotional support. I'm here to give you information. I'm here, which obviously is been wonderful prior to this, but I agree there was definitely a lot more agency and action that took place within the course of the episode. I completely lost my question. Maybe Dennis will grab it for me.
Well, I
go ahead,
can
Dean.
tell you just real quickly was because Annelise, I told them how we put you through the outline in an entirely different episode.
Oh yes, that did happen.
And I blame myself because early on I was like, I don't know. And it just goes to show you sometimes you should be more decisive because you can save your writer time. But I just want to say, like, you know, Annelise did such an incredible job on the script. And like when the writer's assistant steps up and not only does one great script, but frankly does a great script and a really good outline for another script, like that makes our jobs so easy. But what was I cannot tell you, like there are 3 or 4 episodes in season 1 that were extremely hard to do. And this is probably right at the top of the list because we knew we wanted Martinez and Ben to work together. And Martinez and Ben working together has the effect of kind of hijacking the leap from the original story. You know what I mean? Like but you can't hijack it so much that you're just like, oh, what's her name? I don't care if she gets off the island. So there was like Annelise had a really challenging balancing act to do. And it was like as a room, we talked about how early should the Leaper X come in? Should it be after 1 commercial break? Should it be after 2 commercial breaks? Like, and I think ultimately she found the magic combination that I think was believable. And you know, I found the twist of him stabbing Ben. I thought Annelise crushed it.
Yeah,
I have to, if you don't mind me giving credit, Dean, that was Martin Giro had that pitch actually when we were breaking the episode. He was like, and what if Ben gets stabbed? And we were all just
I
like,
remember.
what? And we were most of us were like, no, we're not going to do that. But like many things with Martin, first of all, like he's the showrunner. But second of all, I mean, he's really smart and he's sometimes just like a little ahead of like where like at least my brain was. So for like 5 minutes, I was like, I don't know, man. But then afterwards, we fought to keep it in. When we did the outline and then went to the script that we did now, there was a little bit of discussion of should Ben still get stabbed, and we're glad he did. Although it was funny, my husband looked at me when we were watching. He said, "Did you just stab Ben?" I was like, "Yeah, sorry." It's like, no, I liked him.
We had talked about doing a like Ben is dying in Act 5 a couple of times during the season, but this was the one.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that it's one of the things that's kind of incredible about the episode, and I'd love to hear a little bit about this from you, Annelise, is that the fact that we've got, you know, so much stuff happening, so many reveals. We bring Leaper X in, you know, you're putting Ben in a life or death situation. You're having these, you know, these awesome moments back at HQ, and you know, and Addison's got a lot to do. One of the things though that I feel like is never lost is of course the commentary on the just deplorable conditions of this facility, which unfortunately was all too common, especially in the 50s. Can you talk a little bit about how you balance something like that out so that you can, you know, still get into that, you know, the thematic element of just sort of this, you know, this patriarchal kind of ideal of what mental fitness is, and how it completely undercuts the acceptance of and treatment of mental illness, which is something that, you know, I've kind of been on my soapbox about at least since this afternoon when I saw the episode, but it's something that's always in my mind. So I would love to hear about how you sort of were able to balance all of those elements while not losing the importance of that thematically.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually really nervous about it when we started breaking this episode. Yeah, it's funny. Dean said Drew's coming on. Drew Lindo actually really wanted to do an insane asylum, and I was quite nervous about it just because, you know, mental health is really delicate and you want to be really intelligent about that sort of thing. And yeah, it was definitely a concern. I think our director, Jude Wang, did a fantastic amount of research on the time period and was able to come up with some really good, realistic sets for us. As far as just how the patients were treated, I think Judith to me was a very special character. I've had a few friends and close family members struggle with infertility. And even nowadays, it's something that's very hard to talk about in the whole postpartum depression, but even just depression from losing an unborn child is a very real thing. And that a lot of people, I've had friends and family members who weren't really understood in that struggle. And yeah, so that was a real inspiration to us. You know, obviously there were some people in these facilities with more, you know, severe conditions, but we really wanted to, or I really was excited to have Judith be that character that that our characters kind of get to know and love, since, you know, the women who've lost pregnancies, that's not just something that's talked about a lot.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful point, and I think that, you know, using the word hysteria, even, and the fact that her, you know, her ex-husband is the one that had her committed, and obviously, you know, it's impossible to escape, you know, the misogynistic connotation that a word like hysteria even has in the first place. So I think that it was actually very powerful, and it certainly made the end with Magic, you know, telling Janice that, you know, she was happy, she adopted a child, and, you know, I just thought that was really a touching moment. I you know, I enjoyed that that sense of wrap up for her, because it's obviously that's the point, right, of the show, is to make these things that went wrong, you know, better, and that certainly seemed like the mission was accomplished. Drew Lindo, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
What is this little party happening here? I had no idea.
Hi, Drew.
Things happen. Hi,
What's up,
Annelise.
Drew?
Hi, Caitlin.
Hi.
Did we all wish Caitlin a happy belated birthday? Because it was just her birthday recently.
Right.
So could we do that?
That's right.
Happy birthday, Caitlin.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Happy
birthday.
Yeah, Drew came to my birthday brunch and then left and didn't pay for his meal.
Can I just say, hold on, folks, hold on. I've been framed. I Venmo'd someone and then was told, and then the Venmo was returned to me. I was told that Caitlin covered the whole birthday brunch by herself.
It's because people brought presents
on us for the rest of our lives.
That's right.
Tried to pay, and I was denied. So
This is our next TikTok right here, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Putting down the timestamp right there. Write it down.
So, you know, obviously, once again, we wish you a happy birthday via social media. But now that you're here, happy birthday, Caitlin.
Thank you so much.
I just have a question to ask you, though. It's your birthday. You paid for brunch?
Well, because I forgot to say no presents, and then people showed up with presents, and then I was like, I can't ask people to come to my birthday. It's like, here, please pay to come out to brunch and pay for a present. Like, I'm a jerk. So I'm a sneaky one anyway. I'm like, you got to watch me. I'll sneak a card to the waitress when no one's looking. Generally, Ray and I fight for it. So, but yeah. So, and Drew attempted, and he obviously Venmo'd somebody. He tried.
Remain nameless, and then was rebuffed. So that's now I'm gonna ninja pay for something at some point, and have mentioned for this slight.
Yeah, Drew, just do the I've got to use the restroom thing. That's what I've done in the past. You know, you just yeah. Pardon me, I'll be right back.
Slide a card across the table and be done with it. Yeah. Next year.
I'm just glad to hear it's not a case of somebody just setting the bill up like in the middle of the table and waiting to see who's going to take it, and everybody just sits there kind of like, you know, who's going to do it.
Well, generally we stare at Dean or Martin, but Ernie was there, so that's the third person you stare. Mr. Hudson, I believe somebody was in Ghostbusters. Hands up if you were in Ghostbusters.
You've got Ghostbusters money, so you're buying.
That's right.
I'm so thrilled that you're all here. This is really great, and I you know, I speak for everybody in the room that we appreciate you guys coming by. You know, want to get that out of the way before we start grilling you. No, there's not going to be any grilling. One of the things that I did kind of remember that I wanted to ask earlier, and I think either Dean or Annelise might be the best person to answer this, or Drew perhaps, or Caitlin, you can hop in on this one too. The decision to have Addison have the ability to see, have Martinez have the ability to see Addison. I'm curious what went into that, and just what was the, you know, the decision behind that. Obviously, over the course of the episode, I mean, it makes total sense, like from a narrative perspective, but just from that, like, sort of technical, you know, pseudoscience quantum leap perspective of like, ooh, he can see her. How is that possible? Is that just because, again, the project, you know, that he's on is also using Ziggy, you know, as is kind of assumed here, or is there something more to it? Drew, go for it.
See, this is weird because we stopped working hours ago, but now I'm raising my hand with an emoji like we do every day. But
It's true, we do.
Not to take away anybody else's answer, but I will say that one of my memories from the original show is Al being like, "She is evil, Sam. She like." There was a whole, like, I forget which Leaper episode that was, but there was a whole episode where people were acknowledging other Leapers and holograms. So that was a part of one thing that was talked about at one point, which is like those rules. Some version of those rules had been established, I believe, but Annelise should talk about this because she wrote this episode, not myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was obviously the original Evil Leaper episode. By the way, Drew Lindo did contribute something very cool to this episode that you need to ask him about. He came up with Ziggy as the mole. So that is Drew's pitch. So you should ask him about that. But yeah, back to this. Yeah, well, it probably won't shock any of you. I wasn't an original viewer of the show because I wasn't born yet, but I did obviously watch it when I started working on the series. And, I had a chat with Deborah Pratt about it. And she had a different memory than you did, Drew, where she seemed to recall that the Leapers and the holograms couldn't typically talk, but we rationalized it that because the Evil Leapers, right, they were using a different machine than Sam Beckett was, whereas this is the same technology. So we were able to rationalize it by saying that they're using the same technology. And we've also, as you know, Jen was a hologram in episode 15, and then briefly in episode 12, Ian was a hologram. So we've kind of, it's less of, the syncing to brainwaves thing. I'm rambling because I'm uncomfortable talking about this, so I'll stop. But
no, you're doing great.
You're great. You're doing awesome.
Also, on a creative level, though, we recognize that Caitlin, who's so talented and so fantastic every week, is very limited in who she gets to play scenes with when she goes into Ben's leaps. So for us, it was a rich opportunity to activate Addison in a way where she could really come to Ben's aid in a way that she's never able to do before because of this crossing of the time travelers in a leap.
Yeah, and again, we talked a little bit about that earlier. I just really thought that was cool to have the opportunity, for her to do more on the leap. Caitlin, talk about that the fact that it wasn't just HQ scenes or you were with Ben, that there was the opportunity for you to actually have this contact outside of that on the leap.
It was fantastic. It was like the first time that I felt like I was operating, you know what I mean? Like I had a lot of agency, and there's this, it's interesting when you're playing scenes where I'm trying to help somebody get a goal rather than me having direct access to, it changes how you change from the coach of the basketball team to a player, you know what I mean? It's just, there's something different there. So that was really, really, really cool. And also, Walter's great. So it was just really cool to play that, because we don't know if he's going to help. We don't know if helping's going to help, obviously. Right. That went sideways on us. So yeah, I love it. And I'm really appreciative of the writers for opening up that avenue for me. But in general, just allowing Addison to rely on her own information and abilities, and not just so much here's Ziggy, here's information, actually, relying on her own prowess.
If you go back and watch this episode, one of the things you'll catch is that it's not a group decision for Addison to go back in and talk to Martinez. In fact, Addison makes the decision as she senses there's conversation going on about what to do and what not to do. And she kind of puts together this conversation's no bueno. And I'm just going to leave it. I have the clues I need, and I'm doing my plan. And then Magic ultimately supports her plan. But, it's one of, if not the first time, where basically you had Addison make a decision about what was going to happen in the leap without really getting the full sign off from Magic. Because I mean, let's be honest, they were debating letting Ben fail. And Addison's just like, I'm out of here.
Right.
Like, I'm not letting Ben fail. And I'm going to trust Martinez and risk all of this. And it's a pretty big risk, especially given how close Ben comes to dying.
Right.
And that's cool. I like that because it's motivated from character, but I will leave it coming from Addison because she's got such good instincts and she is a combat leader and she does know people. And I think it's very effective, even how she reasons with Martinez, basically about like almost positioning herself like a Ziggy, like here's a better plan, Martinez. She knows she's not going to appeal to his morality. She's not going to appeal to his humanity. She's going to appeal to one thing. You've got a mission, soldier. It's the same mission as ours. You proved that in 14. So let's do this. And then maybe lets her guard down just one notch too much. And lets Ben get stabbed, which I blame her for.
Sure, that's my fault.
That's completely unfair. Well, no, I mean, those are excellent points. And I think that one of the cool things to see, you know, just kind of from that acting perspective, Caitlin, is it gives you a very different objective and a very different kind of obstacle from what we've seen, you know, previous. And it's really great, you know, and again, it's, you know, the level of agency to just kind of say like, I'm doing this. Was wonderful to see. Obviously Addison's military background comes into play over the course of the episode. You know, and I don't know what you can talk about or want to talk about or anything like that, but I am just kind of curious, you know, for you personally, you know, what was it like to have those opportunities, to have those discussions? Because obviously with the discussion with Martinez is very much, you know, it feels like two soldiers speaking to one another. And then at the end of the episode, as you're kind of, you know, urging Ben on to climb that ladder and get in that car, it's very much, it feels, you know, very much again like a commanding officer saying, you know, you're doing this, you're completing that mission. So I'm curious as to what that felt like for you, and when you know, when you saw that stuff, you know, how it might have touched you.
I mean, it's something I have a lot of access to. It feels like a version of myself that I know, and it feels like a good place to fall back on when shit goes sideways. So what, you know what I mean? So when things went really sideways, it was actually kind of a really cool, unique experience to be able to fall back on something in a very specific way, that felt, you know, like a version of home. You know, I'm sure there's other people that have experiences that are similar that are outside of the military. If you were part of any sort of group or work, even a work, you know, setting can create shorthands and ways of speaking to each other that don't necessarily need all of the softness and the niceness and the you know, flowers that I might have delivered that same to get the same outcome to a different person. I probably would have taken a lot of heat off and a lot of bottom lineness, but I mean, I think they really wrote it well, and it was just easy to step right into in that way.
Yeah. What did you think of the fact that Magic, you know, calls you Captain Augustine, and I'd love to hear from Annelise from this one as well, you know, since she wrote it. But I want to ask you first, Caitlin. You know, when Magic comes over the hand link, and you know, and Captain Augustine as opposed to, you know, Addison or you know, anything else, it feels like a call to action in a different way.
Yeah, it absolutely was. He was speaking on a different level to a different version, but not a different, but a very specific version of her. And yeah, it's, I mean, it's something I'm very familiar with. There's still people in my life that'll call me Sergeant Basset every once in a while, and it's like, right. You know, it's just
when you're in trouble.
either when I'm in trouble or they're just that's how they knew me, and it was like, oh yeah, Sergeant Basset did this or that. Oh God, that was a lifetime ago, but I remember it. And I remember the relationship that we had and how it was colored by the military. So it just, it worked. And I made sure somebody read that line when we were shooting it. Because obviously Ernie wasn't there.
Sure.
But there was something about having that. It did help me settle into like, okay. Like get out of girlfriend mode and get into operator mode.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that. Annelise, do you want to talk a little bit about, writing that moment?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I would say this was actually one of my favorite moments of the episode. When we were breaking this in the room, most of these scripts are actually a real collaborative effort with a lot of the writers contributing wonderful ideas. This one was one of the small parts that I will take credit for, because on the board it just said like Addison uses Ziggy to convince Martinez to help Ben. And I was like, well, what are we going to do with that? That's a little vague. And I just thought, when I was writing the outline, I recalled when Caitlin was cast. Caitlin, I believe you had a background in intelligence. Am I making that up?
Nope, that's right.
Yep. Okay, great, awesome. So I remembered that, and I was like, well, why don't we pull that in? She was kind of like the intelligence officer, and then it bringing it back with magic just felt right. I always love a good callback if you bring something up to then close it at the end. But yeah, I thought it was just. It's good I wanted a chance to talk more about Addison as a character, not just like the hologram reading the hand link, to just dig into her backstory and how she's really an accomplished person, before becoming our wonderful hologram who makes excellent jokes,
Absolutely. It feels at this point in the series too, it all feels so well earned, and it feels so owned by the actors as well. That it's great to get to really see some of this stuff from the characters. And certainly I feel like we've had a number of moments with Addison in particular, with this episode and SOS and even Paging Dr. Song, where we've really gotten to get inside her mind a little bit and her background even more in very in very functional ways, in ways that aren't necessarily just exposition or somebody rattling off details, which is great. One of the things that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which I very well could be, it happens often, in the original draft of the pilot, I think Addison was actually had been like a medical specialist in the military or something like that. Was the decision to go away from that and lean into the intelligence thing, did that have to do with Caitlin's own background in intelligence, or was that just kind of separate and kind of a happy accident? Dean, Drew, anyone?
That's a Dean question, seems like.
I actually think in the original pilot, like, are you talking about the one from over a year ago? Like,
yes,
the March pilot?
Yeah.
No, I think she was intel.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, she was intel, because I remember reading it and being like, did they call my mom? Like, it was very close to my life. Yeah, it was like weirdly close. And then I think obviously when I got cast, they tripled down on it.
For sure. Drew, let's get to it. All right. It was your idea. You're the one that old school fans are going to be like, what the hell was he thinking?
Annelise, what have you done? What have you done, Annelise? Let's just say this. There's not a whole lot I can say about this, because until we see next week's episode, I would say the contextual side of what that revelation means has yet to be explored. But clearly I will say that, an all-seeing, all-knowing, hyper advanced artificial intelligence system that is absorbing data throughout history at all times is pretty omnipresent and connected to a lot of devices would be pretty hard to keep secrets around. So I do think Janice's motivations for the season make a little bit more sense now that this giant all-seeing eye inside of Quantum Leap may or may not be trustworthy. Is that me dancing? That's me dancing around.
I know. I think it was some great dancing.
Drew,
I'll just call you savvy and glove.
I've already talked about the fact that in the world of time, like good guys and bad guys, that you can almost argue is defined by who's the person leaping from the furthest in the future, right? Because something we talk about all the time is, everybody thinks they're the good guy.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they're the hero in the story. I mean, if it's not, it's not an accident that when we met Martinez, he's an upstanding young man who's willing to sacrifice for his country. Like, that's not, that can be your antagonist. You know what I mean? Your antagonist can be yourself, or a future version of yourself. So I think, like, it, to me, it just makes so much sense. and frankly, if it weren't Ziggy, I think we would have much more splaining to do. You know, like
So I have a really nerdy question for the writers. So like the Evil Leapers were brought up in this episode, and it's been pointed out, ever since Martinez entered the picture, is that while it was never said on screen in the original series, in one of the scripts of the Evil Leaper episodes, it very definitively says that the Evil Leaper project takes place in 2020. No, I'm sure you are not operating.
Wait,
that
Dennis,
right
Dennis,
now.
that was in a script, but never made it to air. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was in a script, but it was never actually said in
So
the
not
episode.
officially canon because it wasn't on screen.
Oh, look at them already trying to. I'm out of here. They're already trying to get out of this. No. So I'm curious. Like, I'm sure you're gonna. Do you have an idea, like a retconning of that, of where the Evil Leapers did come from? What year?
Well, Martinez is not an
isn't it?
evil leaper in
That's
this
a good
one. We
comment.
reference them as something from the original series, but in our timeline, we haven't explored any evil leapers because Martinez is a leaper from the future using our accelerator. So the jury's still out on, like, he's not an evil leaper. We call him that, or you might suspect he is, but he's not from that Lothos world.
Sure. The question I was trying to ask is like, but obviously like Aaliyah and Zoe and that Evil Leaper project does now officially exist in this version of Quantum Leap. Were they in 2020, or do you have an idea? Have you even thought about, like, was this project like even further out in the future?
who knows? I mean, maybe Sam got him. Sam's out there.
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting, two things actually. I love the idea of secrets. Janice had that incredible line a few episodes back about secrets and about how time travel is kind of like, you have a time machine. There can be no secrets. Once you say something, it's out there. And the idea that technology itself, thematically, I would say, for a good chunk of the series, has been explored as this as this thing that's like, oh, it's helping us. It's this benevolent force. It's this and then we come to see, well, hey, that's likely not true. That there are consequences. I don't expect an answer here, but going into the finale, how much of that is going to be explored? Excellent. So my next question is,
You said you don't expect an answer.
I know,
We follow instructions.
I was just mining that for a bit. No, but I do think that that there have been some really wonderful themes, and seeing Ziggy revealed as the mole, seeing the ominous red lights lighting up at the end, it's going to strike a chord with a lot of viewers, people I think that are new to the series through this iteration, people that are coming back to the series as fans of the classic series. Like, it carries a lot of weight. So without spoiling anything, Drew, having that decision, and I agree, I don't think you could have made it anyone else. Like, it couldn't have been Addison, it couldn't have been Ian, it couldn't have been Jen, it couldn't have been Magic. Like, I just don't think that would have played at all in any way that viewers would have been like, oh yeah, what's next. So with the decision to have it be Ziggy, like, what, you're not going to answer this question.
Well, let me just put it this way. Obviously, our iteration of Ziggy is different from the original iteration of Ziggy, just in terms of, like, where Ian put together a lot of the code back together and line by line. So there's been a transformation of some degree, right? Even just the fact that we're not currently utilizing Ziggy as an actual voiced character within the show. So something has changed over the course of one series to the other. But I would say that, like, yes, we are telling a story in which the technology we're using, clearly someone else is using it at another point in time. And so I think Margarita's episode was sort of teasing some of these ideas in the nuclear reactor, right? Which is this warning that technology can, no matter what its best intentions are, in the wrong hands, who knows what can happen. So I think, people, yes, Ziggy's the Mole is a badass act out, and it certainly gets people talking. But we didn't say evil Ziggy, nor did we say that Ziggy has betrayed the trust of time travelers all over. We're just saying that there is, there sensitive information clearly, and also again in episode 10, I believe, when Janice was being questioned, she was teeing all this stuff up, which is just that like none of this information is safe inside of this building, essentially, when time travel is involved. So we've been prepping for it in little breadcrumb kind of ways, I think. But that's not to say that we are assassinating the characters. We're just saying that, clearly we're not the only ones operating it.
That is an excellent distinction to make. And for the record, I never thought that you were assassinating the character, or that this meant that now Ziggy's evil or anything like that at all. But I do that to
Deborah. Deborah would kill me, Sam.
that was going to be my next question. My next question is like, what does Deborah think about all this? Can you answer that yet? Is that something we'll have to say?
She
for
hasn't
later?
talked to us for the last month. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Just stormed out.
That's apropos because Ziggy hasn't spoken either.
No. Deborah's supportive of anything that comes from a thematic place that ultimately she doesn't feel like collides with anything truly important from the original. And so, for example, like if we were to say Ziggy has turned malevolent and Ziggy has become, say, Lothos, like that might be a Deborah conversation that we would have.
Sure.
But again, if and when people go back and watch this season from episode 1, and I'm intrigued for people to do that, especially given this sort of feeling that the show's gotten stronger as we go on. Janice almost from the beginning has been trying to figure out the motivations of everybody at QL, right? Like she was running predictive software on them, like she had them fence off Ziggy. Like Janice has known what Ben told her, which is I mean, you can imagine the scene. Hi, Janice, it's Ben's song. Like, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to blow up your entire fucking life, because the world, is like all sorts of horrible shit could happen unless you help me do this leap. And she's just like, great. Well, now, like, thanks. My dad's project is like, all this stakesy stuff. I have to do it. I'm not that thrilled about doing it. And I have to work with people that I don't really like. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, like, she's been actually incredibly consistent all year. And the one thing she didn't know is who it was. And in this episode, I mean, she's like us. We didn't think of Ziggy. She didn't think of Ziggy. And then she has that revelation, like, makes sense. It's Ziggy.
I mean, I think it's an incredible moment that'll carry a lot of weight and have people wondering, what the hell is going to happen, especially going into these last 2 episodes. Talking about Janice, she has a couple of just wonderful moments. One of my favorites is the interaction with Addison, where Addison comes out of the imaging chamber, like, what the hell is she doing here? And I love Janice's lines. I thought we were good now. Annelise, do you want to talk a little bit about that little exchange? And then Caitlin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well.
I so wish I could take credit for that. I believe that was either Martin or Dean adding a beautiful showrunner polish to the script. I wish I could take credit for it. I think it's hysterical because they actually do leave on pretty good terms.
Right.
The last time they spoke. So I think it was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. Janice is so fun to write, and I will say that the actress who plays her is absolutely lovely. She's such a nice person, and I'm not say I was surprised because I know she's a good actress. But I was like, wow, you're so nice. I didn't see that coming. But just like Janice, Janice is misunderstood. She's not evil.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I defer to Caitlin, who had a lot of fun with this scene. Caitlin was very eager to like.
I did have a lot of. First of all, I love any scene with Janice because it's the only character I can openly dislike. I'm like, you ruined my life. I do not like you. I want to hurt you. The only reason I am not doing so is because you have information I eventually need. And if they would let me, I'd probably hurt you to get it. But also, so, and like, I mean, we ended it on good terms. Like, even though she threw me a bone, like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a con artist telling you a piece of truth. Like, thanks a bundle, but you've been screwing me for months now. Like, you know, I appreciate whatever you're saying, but I'm going to take it with a glacier of salt. And like, I am not swayed at all on the Janice front. And I don't think Addison was ever swayed. So it makes it really, really fun because she's you know, she's a genius. She's smarter, but it's one of those things where like, God, just talk a little more because you might be smarter, but we're in a room now. And so that's fun. And then Georgina is like 5 foot nothing of just powerhouse. Like, she can get under your skin in the best way, in like a way you want an actor to get under your skin and just needle you. So like handing her those little needly lights, because I think like in 11 she said something about a bomb dropping, and her sister was like boom, and I was like, I hate you. Like, I hate you, but it's so fun in the best way. And like, I want more of her. I want Georgina all the time. I want her and I to just get into it all the time. It's just one of my favorite parts about later in the season when Addison and Janice finally got to like collide.
Yeah. I mean, I think you are certainly not alone. I think everybody wants more Janice. So I'm glad that we got her. You know, it's funny because knowing that this was coming, that we were going to get more of her this week, and hearing people just say like, "Where's Janice? Where's Janice?" And it was just sort of like, just wait, it's gonna be worth it. And I'm so glad.
Janice was? No.
No. It's funny because earlier I had to completely just dance around it with Dennis because he didn't watch the screener, and so he sent me a message saying something like, you know, I just want to see Janice, and I wanted so badly, but you got to see Janice, don't worry. But no, I mean, she's fantastic, and I love that exchange. Another exchange that I loved too, and Annelise, you said that this was Mason, that they came up with the line, oh gosh, in the you know, computer voice.
You
I'm
are welcome, Addison.
Thank you. Yes. I thought that was also just a wonderful moment. It feels weird right now because, you know, Ian is clearly saddled with all of this stuff, and, you know, the information of what future Ian is going to do, but also, of course, the pressures of what Ian has to do right here and right now, and they're clearly under a lot of pressure, and I think that they're also seen as a bit of an emotional support for the other members of the team at times. We see it with Jen, we've seen it with Addison. So I would love to hear, and any of you can jump in and answer this, but I'll start with you, Annelise, about, you know, when you're writing the character of Ian for this episode, like, what frame of mind do you kind of picture them being in at this particular point in the season?
Yeah, I love the character of Ian. I want to pivot really quick though, just a brief aside about where we found Janice. It was I was so excited that we got to bring back Beth Calavici because she's just a fan favorite of the writers' room, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do it. So I was just so thrilled. I always love kind of the lighter moments in our show somewhat. That we were discussing a while back, you know, well, where is Janice? And I just love the idea of getting to go to Beth Calavici's house.
I love that she was under house arrest at Beth's. I love that.
She was in timeout, basically. Yeah.
She was in timeout.
Adult timeout.
When you poison your mom, you got to stay there and
But I will answer your question about Ian because they're a fantastic character, and I will say that in our season finale they have an incredible scene. They have an incredible arc that I'm really excited for you all to see. I think that what's interesting is Ian and Ben have a very deep friendship, and I believe the next episode will dive into that a little bit. So I think Ian, we've often talked about them as a very ethical, moral person. So I think this has been a challenging time for them, you know, because not only are they learning about what their future self did, but Martinez is kind of a morally ambiguous person, you know, he's not entirely bad. I'm trying not to say too much. I'm very new to the podcast world, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. I love
It's
Ian,
okay.
and
I'll start
watching
beeping
Ian,
you.
and thank you, please do. I'm well, Dean's on here too. I'm like, Dean, just like text me. Anyway, someone let me know. I really like my job. I need to pay my rent, so I don't want to say too much, but I will say that Mason and Caitlin acting together was so much fun. They're clearly very good friends. And there's something that you guys didn't get to see, but during one of those scenes, I got to do a slate of an episode, like where you do the director slate and you do it. And Caitlin messed with me during it, and she's like, "You did it wrong," and I like totally freaked out. And it was very entertaining. Didn't make the cut, obviously, but so
Should have made the cut.
they have wonderful chemistry together on scene.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Caitlin, you talked briefly. We didn't get a chance to talk about it a whole lot because obviously in SOS you didn't have a whole lot of scenes with them. But talk a little bit about your relationship with Mason, but also Addison's relationship with Ian, because I do think it's important. I think that Ian, it's so interesting the way the characters revolve around one another, that they're kind of their own solar system in a way, because it's not just a case of one character being sort of the pivot point. There's really this sense of kind of, everybody orbiting one another in ways that are incredibly important. And so I'm curious as to what that's like off screen as well as on screen.
Off screen, Mason is a monster. Just
Clearly.
a bully and no, Mason's so wonderful. From the moment we met, and it's not a story I'm gonna share now, but I'll share it one day. We met in a makeup trailer. I called them a name. It was fine. And immediately we became best friends. And because they were acting like that name. And it's just Mason's been really fun, and they're such a just vibrant, alive human being. And we're actually from a similar place, and our families have some kind of similar backgrounds, and we both lived in New York, so we had a lot of crossover. And just as friends and like somebody like a bit of a mentor and a scene partner, I in particular have always really appreciated my scenes with Mason, even though I understand full well they will steal it. It will be Mason's scene. And I understand, like there's some things that you understand. And when they do things like emergencies or tag that scene with the Ziggy robot voice, I'm like, was I even in that scene? I don't know. I'm not sure. But that's the fun of working with Mason and having a character like Ian, who not only is so full of heart and love, but is just so fun and has the left and right, latitude to just to explore and to have fun. So in a personal way, Mason is one of the best human beings I've ever met, and a phenomenal actor. And I feel like the Academy needs to just go ahead and open up a different gender award, because they'll be there soon. From an Addison Ian perspective, it's again one of my favorite places, because it's really the one place that Addison can just take it all off and lean on somebody who is not only one of her best friends, but she trusts implicitly to have her back. Not that she doesn't with Jen or Magic, but there's just a clear connection with Ian there. So I've always cherished the scenes when we just get a little beat to ourselves, or even, not necessarily, but just a moment between the two of us that it can be fun and light and get the job done. And it always feels like, when Mason needs something, like you said, we all orbit around each other. And I think the writers have done a really impressive job of making sure where somebody's weak, somebody else is strong. And I think that's it's just smart writing, honestly.
Yeah, I absolutely. One of the things that that I've been interested about, especially with the way that the characters sometimes interact, is the fact that there's a history that exists that we're not party to, right? That the project's been around for a while. These people have known one another for a while, and we've speculated at times, even go so far as to half joke that were Ben and Ian ever an item before Addison came into the picture, because there's a closeness that's hinted at with the relationship with Ian, that I feel like, other than Addison, it feels like their relationship was probably the closest relationship that Ben had before he leapt out. And I'm curious.
In that vein, I also think they're the only people that are as smart as each other to a certain extent.
Totally.
Yes. I mean, maybe Janice, but Janice wasn't on the team. So I think they can speak languages that just other people, us regular human beings, mortals, can't speak. And so I do think that's part of their closeness as well.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up, because there is something, it's almost like what you were saying earlier about that shorthand, like, like soldier to soldier or whatever, that when you've got two brilliant minds in the room, there's kind of like this shorthand that might exist separate from anybody else around. Dennis, do you have anything? Because I got to be honest with you, I'm having a blast. I don't want it to end, but I'm running out of steam because it's 11:30 here.
Sure. So 2 questions. These are writer questions. These are one I've seen has been asked on Twitter all night. Have the writers discussed whether or not Martinez has a hologram?
I defer to people paid more than me.
The look on Drew's face.
Martin and I have talked about it, and we have a very definitive answer.
All right.
Well,
Awesome.
Isn't that cleared up in 18, Dean? Like, don't you kind
of
or not? I don't know, guys.
Doing the marketing
so
for the finale
exciting
right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna
That's
ruin
right.
it now. 18, I saw a bit of it. It's the only episode I got to preview a little. I'm so excited.
Nice.
And so another question along that vein, Dean, earlier you said like go back and watch the season from the beginning. And I'm curious, like episode 3 is where like Ian drops the thing of, we know Ben is on a trajectory. It's going to take, I can't remember what the exact line is, like 10, maybe 20 leaps. If you had only gotten 13 episodes and you had to wrap it up really quickly, would we have seen basically the same story, just in a more condensed version? Or did you have a different out for the end of the story that you were going to use?
No, I mean, no. I'm sure we would have wrapped up the story, just because
Sure.
I think we're so conscious of the open-endedness of Sam Beckett, and sort of, we didn't want to duplicate that. But, or as Martin likes to say, if they only give us 13, who the hell cares what we do? Because there's no season 2. Because Martin's done over 400 episodes of TV, so he's eminently practical. But I think we would have just probably cut out a couple of major steps. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what those would have been. But we were lucky enough to know we were always planning on more than 13, with the idea being, if we have to squish them, we'll squish them.
Sure.
But I'm glad we didn't, because I feel like it paces out pretty nicely this way.
Well, I say someone who is still wounded from the ending of the first Quantum Leap 30 years later. We appreciate that care in wrapping up a story, even if it is only 13 episodes or what it would have been.
But we're glad that it's not. We're glad that it's not.
Definitely not.
I mean, never leapt home doesn't mean isn't still leaping.
That's right.
I mean,
now, as far as Deborah's concerned, he's still out there righting wrongs.
Glass half empty.
You guys, you all are in what are you, like 4 episodes deep now into season 2, as far as what you've gotten before cameras, or
3? I
is
was
it only 3
actually
right
just
now?
about to ask Caitlin if she's seen episode 4, but I don't think we've released it.
No,
You
you sure
seen
haven't.
it before.
It's fine. We start shooting it Friday, but don't worry. Just send it whenever.
I'll send it tomorrow.
Do you guys need him? Do you guys need a moment? So I it's so
As if
exciting.
they
I
have
mean,
time to learn a whole script while they're filming another script.
Yeah.
right.
While I'm an hour up north in the woods.
Oh, in the woods, you say?
Don't worry about it. Oh, come on, that doesn't give anything away.
That's
It's
a
outside.
showbiz term.
No, I know.
It's a term. When you say up in the woods,
It's outside. It's half outside.
So I want to throw a question over to you, Drew. And this is something, Dean, you kind of talked about earlier too. So I'd love to hear from you as well. But I want to start with Drew. The notion that that where we are now is the past to those in the future, right? And those in the future have a perspective that we don't. So they might look back on something that we've done and think that it's a wrong that needs to be right. And in the original series, we see a number of times, for instance, where Sam rights a wrong and it results in people not being born, or it results in people dying. So I'm curious, has that ever
that when they remember all these fond memories of Quantum Leap, like it's all sunshine and roses and music smells and hugs, and no one's erased in the popular consciousness.
No one's erased.
So, well, but no, I mean, I think it is a really good point. It's something that Dennis and I, obviously, two people that have a Quantum Leap podcast, we've had plenty of time to talk about it. But the notion that there are people out there that no longer exist, and obviously the flip side of that is true. But I'm curious if that is maybe motivated, if not necessarily in a specific story manner, like you're not out there trying to get No-Nose Pruitt's kids back alive or whatever, but if that has maybe motivated some of the thought process into the fact that just because you think you're setting something right doesn't mean that a future perspective won't necessarily say no, we need to go back and change this for this reason.
Yeah, I mean, I do think everybody has their own interpretation of what Quantum Leap is, and it can be many different things as its own beast, because the kinds of varieties of stories it tells are multifaceted. But we as a room have definitely talked about the fact that for every feel-good episode, there's a Cobra Kai alternate POV on that episode that is not so feel good, right? I mean, for every winner, there's a loser, and that's true of any story ever, right? Yeah. So like, we're all hugging, like, Roy Gordon is like, he took my girlfriend, he took my championship, that motherfucker.
That was I red teamed the shit out of that episode. No, I still stand by. Ben was the bad guy.
I mean, that guy was. We could tell there were some abusive vibes that guy had. But anyways, I would just say, yes, we talk about that, and that's certainly strong motivations in that you can get into if you want to. But it's also like we also are trying to be careful not to puncture the magic fabric of the feel of what Quantum Leap wants to be for people. And I think what I admire about what Martin and Dean did this year and even next year is I do think there are moments where we dip into some elements of complexity a little bit, that without disrupting that spell. And I think when you get to the end of the season, you'll feel a sense of that, and we'll see how far we go down those roads in the future. But yeah, I mean, Ben's the know-it-all in every leap because he's from the future, and anyone further ahead would also feel they are morally righteous in whatever they're doing. So and if anybody knew the circumstances of how their life changed one day for the worse compared to our guest star's life for the better, they'd be righteously pissed off. So so it's something we do talk about sometimes, but we also we don't believe that. Sorry, I won't speak for everybody. For me, I don't believe the accelerator is out to just like survival of the fittest people. I think it really is whatever is powering this, whatever's in charge. I would hope it's trying to make the best decision for how life goes for people. So that's just my interpretation.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. We talked a little bit about this, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw this over to Dean, but I would love to hear everyone's opinion on this, quite frankly. But Magic has the beautiful Martin Luther King quote from a couple episodes ago about the moral arc of the universe, and the notion that there is some sort of force at work here beyond just pure technology, while also not necessarily leaning as much into the idea that it's God, as the original series did, and leaving it open-ended enough that God, time, fate, or whatever still exists as an idea and as a concept in the revival, but maybe in a little bit of a different way. I'm very curious as to kind of what that means to you, and the forces that could be at work here. Is that something that you would ever want to like make a concrete, definite statement on? Or do you think it does work better as being something that we get to kind of wonder about, that there is some sort of benevolent force behind all of this, but that we don't necessarily know exactly what it is?
Well, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. Like, I think that, like, I don't mind saying that questions like that and our characters asking questions like that, like, what does this technology mean? How does it work? What view of what assumptions are you making, like, about how it works? Are fantastic questions that should be asked of our characters on screen by our characters who are sacrificing loved ones. And like, at a certain point, it's like, Addison's lost her fiance, like,
Yeah.
Does she start to say to herself, like, but he's making the universe a better place? Like, am I okay with that trade? I think spiritual questions like you're asking are going to be at the heart of season 2. Like, that's not like, I know that's not some giant spoiler. It's just a decision we made as a room that we want to be asking these questions because they're incredibly rich. And so when I was doing 14, I just wanted to plant sort of and verbalize what magic I think has represented all along, which is a faith that, yeah, you know what, I've seen this, I've been leapt into, I've felt it, and now I've revived the project. I'm gonna say I feel pretty confident. Don't know what's happening exactly, but I do think it ties into what spiritualists, like great spiritualists like Dr. King, say, like that, the moral, like we've heard the moral arc bends towards justice. We've probably all heard that quote, but like, I don't really know that we've ever thought about, okay, well, what makes it bend? I mean, bending something requires a force, right? Bending something, it's a pull. And I think magic has declared that he believes that quantum leap is part of the pull. And is that, in my opinion, science, religion, they're all versions of trying to understand the same story and also to decide whether we believe that's the way the universe works or not. And to circle back to something Drew said earlier about, this week we destroy 400 lives inadvertently, and it's like, but our show is ultimately about this notion that human beings have a superpower. The superpower is the ability to help someone else. The superpower is the ability to do for someone else the thing that they cannot do for themselves. Every single person on this Zoom can go through their mind and can think of events, circumstances that seemed unbearable, burdens that seemed completely impossible to carry, that a friend or loved one picked up as if it was light as a feather. And that is the design, in my opinion, of the universe. It's certainly the design of humanity. It's a design that's being lost in the modern world. I'm getting a little philosophical, but like we're supposed to help one another. It's not supposed to be you do everything on your own. It's you do everything as a team. And I think that's at its core what Deborah and Don came up with 30 plus years ago, was that it's a superhero show where we realize the most important superheroes in the world are ourselves, and that like you can be a superhero for someone in any given day. And so I think season 2 is going to be about things like, okay, would you want to be one of those people? Like, where did this technology come from? What does it actually mean? What are the prices of it? Things like that. I think that, to me, when we get into that territory, I just think we become a richer show.
Good night, everybody. We're not going to top that. No, thank you, Dean. That was, I think that was fabulous, and I completely agree. That's the point in so many ways, and I love the fact that is something that's so woven into the bedrock of the show.
And I mean, dare I, like I say it with no judgment about any present situation, except to say that the present situation of our collective humanity seems like any reminder we can get of that is a good reminder. Like,
Yeah.
and I put myself right at the top of the list of getting stressed about the wrong thing, focusing on the wrong thing, not asking help when I need it. You know, there was a circumstances earlier this year where we had done so many episodes in a row and I was sick and I was trying to get a rewrite done on one of the episodes. And Martin looked at me and he's like, "You look terrible, man." And I was like, "Well, yeah, but you know, I got to get this done." And he's like, "No, you don't. Like, I'll take this one." You know, and the fact that besides that, how much do we love Martin, but like I share the story to say, I did not feel comfortable saying, "Hey, I feel terrible. Do you mind? Do you mind?" Like, you know, it's hard to say help, ask for help. And like, at least I think it's become, you know, we view it as a weakness. We view it as a
Yeah.
4-letter word. And it's actually not. Like, nothing in the universe suggests that help is anything but a positive. Like, you can't, there's a bazillion examples in nature of like the flower that grows in such a way that it feeds the bird that when it poops, like fertilizes the flower and keeps it safe from the pest. Like, I mean, at a certain point, we have to accept that that's the design of all of us, is to be part of something. So that's my view.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's
And
superb.
tune in to NBC and find out why. 10 o'clock,
And
9
9 Central
Central.
Monday nights.
Gosh,
Sam, I don't think there's a better way that we could wrap the episode
no,
up than that.
neither.
than
I
that right
completely
there.
agree. I completely agree. I say this with my whole heart. I could stay here all night. Thank you all so much for joining us. Caitlin, Annelise, Drew, Dean. Means a lot to us, and I love that we get to share these moments. I love that we get to hear from you, because the show represents so much of what you just said, Dean, and I think going forward the opportunity to see even more of that is something that can be a balm for us all, especially in times when we might be feeling a little raw. So thank you all for your work. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait until we get the chance to do it again sometime.
Give it a couple weeks.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Thank you for having me
Caitlin's
back.
volunteering.
yeah, Caitlin, thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching and covering all you do.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you, Drew.
Bye, guys.
Annelise,
Thank you,
superb
guys.
work. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Annelise. Bye-bye. And we want to say thank you all for hanging out with us for the last 3 hours. We've been going over 3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being here and joining us. I told you we might have a few surprises. I was surprised by the surprises. I did not anticipate all of that. So again, a huge thank you to Dean for corralling everyone. Thank you to Caitlin and Annelise and Drew for all showing up and sharing so much with us. This has been one of my favorite experiences on the podcast ever, period, without a doubt. And I don't mean just the conversations that we had with them. I mean, from the conversations we had before the episode started to seeing the chat, you know, while we were watching the episode together, to the conversations afterwards. I'm grateful for it, and I'm grateful for you all for joining us. And because he's here, I don't want to embarrass him or anything, but let's give it up for JJ Lindell, who has been creating these incredible posters, one of which you can see right over Dennis's shoulder right now, for the show. The Ben Interrupted poster is awesome, by the way. I loved it. And I'm gonna twist JJ's arm into coming back on the show so we can talk some more at some point, because I enjoy doing that so much.
I feel like Dean was playing the long game when he nudged JJ to do the Ziggy's Running Slow t-shirt, knowing where it was going. Like he knew what he was doing.
He's a mastermind, evil
Now
genius level stuff.
Now we need a new Ziggy's the Mole. And then then Let's Stab Ben. I think that was another one that came out of the discussion tonight.
Yes. Oh, that's gonna be a good one. Well, I think that just about does it. This was kind of a non-traditional episode under non-traditional circumstances for us, for the past, however long we've been covering the first season. But what a blast! Dennis, anything else left to add before we get out of here?
I am one tired dad. That is,
Yeah. It's gonna, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I should go to bed, but after we, leave here, I am absolutely going to encode and upload this episode so that everyone can see it on the YouTube and all that jazz. So,
well, you do that. I'm gonna go take me a nice hot shower. I'm gonna crawl into bed. I'm gonna put on my little CPAP mask.
No.
Hey, get to know me,
careful,
everyone.
Be careful here.
Put on my little CPAP mask. No. I was gonna make a joke about firing up some music. No, never mind.
I know. I was wondering where you were headed with this. I was about to say, my goodness. Thank you as always to everyone, to all of the supporters, to everyone out there who supports this show, whether it's by listening, hitting a download button, a like, a subscribe, whatever, to all of the backers and patrons. Thank you so much. It means the world to us. As always, I would say, look around your community, look around the world at large, see where you can help there first before you throw us a few dimes. But we're grateful for that. There's a lot of wonderful causes out there that we feel passionately about, and we've attempted to share some of those, and we'll continue to do so because we just, as Dean was talking about, we want to be helpers too. We want to right some wrongs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a housekeeping note, Sam, since you're the one who hit record, you need one who stopped recording.
I didn't hit record.
You didn't hit record?
I'm
kidding. I got it.
Awful. All right. Well, to our friends on the East Coast, where it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning, thank you so much for staying up with us. Really appreciate it. It's wonderful to see you all. And we will be back next week to cover Fly the Friendly Skies, I believe. And hopefully we'll get that screener in time so that we can do this normally. But if not, who knows? Maybe something else amazing will happen like it did tonight. In the meantime, as always, take care of yourself, take care of one another, stay safe out there, and remember, always leap responsibly.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.